Yeah. Unknown Brain, Marvin Devine. I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating. Thanks for all the rumors you be claiming. It's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
I know that I gotta stay away from all your games, yeah. I know that I found somebody else to love me one day, yeah. You'll realize the grass ain't greener on the other side, no. You did me dirty for the last time, so now I gotta say goodbye. So now I gotta say
Yeah, my life is lovely now, I'm focused on me. You said you were about to die, I guess the car is on E. But see, I ain't even tripping, cause I just chose to believe that somebody gon' come around and give me just what I need. I don't wanna see you finding, see you looking down and out, coming to me crying, saying you miss having me around. Gave you chances and you blew it, you so easily influenced. All the times you told me beat it, now you gotta face the music. I'm saying
I know that I gotta stay away from all your games, yeah. I know that I found somebody else to love me one day, yeah. You'll realize the grass ain't greener on the other side, no. You did me dirty for the last time, so now I gotta say goodbye. So now I gotta say
Feel me like a Hellcat. Coming like a Hellcat. Like a Hellcat.
Alrighty, everybody, welcome to the Waveline for EDL week number 4. We are at that more than halfway point now in the league, 7-week league. Pretty exciting. We're seeing a lot of storylines develop, a lot of teams kind of make their mark. So going into this 4th week, I'm joined by Clutch and Silent. Matt Pizza, again. Dude just refuses to show up. I don't know, something about like he said something like having a life. That's kind of crazy. Imagine having a life outside of EDL. Cannot be any of us. So Clutch and Silence, how are you two doing this week?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Ready for some great EDL matchups.
Yeah. You know what I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to EDL, obviously. But I'm looking forward who's going to represent us at the Silver Worlds.
True.
Who are going to be those 2 teams that represent the LCS, Elemental League, at Worlds, the minor region? All right. Who's going to be our, the upset kids that come in and win for us? That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, if you guys missed it, there was an announcement that there is an Amateur Worlds going on this season, hosted by, I think, it was Red, right? And a few other people.
Red and Flay and, yeah.
Yeah, so lots of cool people around the amateur scene hosting that. We're very lucky to be included. So, if you win and, you're going to the Amateur Worlds, oh my god, he's in the chat. Mickey Mouse. Yep,
no.
So, oh no, okay. So with that, we're going to just hop right into the recap of last week. So we saw BDE 2-1 Revolution frontline. We had G&E on stream last week against Glacial Phantom. It was a nice 2-0 from them. We're going to get into that match a little bit. We saw some really interesting picks, but before I get too far into that, we had a 2-1 for AH Tyranny against Snack Bears, and then, very exciting series of an FF from the Donut Shop Chocolate against TD Syndicate. So, we're going to start just at the top left here. 2-1 BDE against Revolution Esports. Clutch, if I remember what you said last week, you were a BDE believer.
Yeah, I ended up saying 2-1 BDE. I actually predicted all of these series right. The only one I didn't get the game score right was AH Tyranny Snack Bears, I believe, but I still predicted every series right. I think these 2 teams are very close in skill. As we saw, it went 3 games, right? So they're both pretty solid teams. They're both playoff teams, in my opinion. And looking at these games, they were all pretty close. Okay, game 2 was not close, but all the other games were pretty close. Like game 1 and game 3 between BDE and Rev were super close. The only game that wasn't close was the game that Rev won. Otherwise, all the other games super close. Game 3 looks like BDE pulled out Sona Seraphine and ended up winning with that, which is you don't see that all the time, and so that's pretty unique. Another thing I want to point out is that they beat Hecarim, and Hecarim's really broken. So, I guess that's the counter to Hecarim. You just pick Sona Seraphine, guys. Don't do that in solo queue, please. You will hate your life if you do that. But the work in comp, they look pretty good. Their jungler, BDE Apathy, looked pretty solid the whole series, and I think he's a pretty good jungler. He had 10, he had 12 kills on Gwen, and then he had 11 on Viego, just absolutely carrying his team. So can't wait to see what he does in future weeks. And it was a great series, to be honest.
Yeah, and just looking at that first and that third game, I'm really looking forward to just seeing how BDE Lethal and BDE Tempo are going to continuing to play together. Like you said, they pulled out that Seraphine Sona in that bot lane in that third game. Kind of like I think that was something that happened a while ago. If you saw like Sona Lux for a while, just like double enchanter bot lanes, they tend to float around sometimes under the meta. So it's kind of interesting to see teams pull it off successfully, because to beat those lanes you have to be punishing very hard in that bot lane. So put a lot of pressure onto Lisbanks and Wingman, and Lisbanks we obviously know is a player that really likes his Kai'Sa, really tends to just pop off, hits that W, I'm pressing R, bro, and yeah, I mean, it's a big thing. I think we talked about it before. This bot lane matchup was the one to watch. So, yeah, I think big props to those players. And then I think some honorable mentions. We're both the junglers for both the teams, obviously. Like you said, Clutch. Hopefully I say this right. Jengjabin from Revolution had a really strong showing, I think, that entire week. Playing a lot of those enablers, a lot of those initiators. So that's what I'd like to see more. I think Jengjabin could be that big key player for Revolution if they, tend to play around that kind of play style, find something that works for them. So, unlucky loss. I believed in Revolution last week, but yep, I think it's a big and good series by BDE. But Silent, any other things you're looking for between these two teams in last week's series?
Yeah, I think they're both in a pretty good spot in the standings right now. I think they're actually both in the exact same spot. Yeah, they're both sitting at 2-1 right now. So what I'm looking for, honestly, is them to just be able to find their strong points in the game and be able to just press those advantages as much as possible and just get the free wins as that they can, and be able to try and match those upper teams to get maybe into that upper echelon of teams. Their big thing is they're gonna have to find their advantages and actually play to them.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said before, we're on week number 4. It's a 7-week regular season. So, I mean, I think with a team like Revolution, who's sitting at 2-1 right now, and BDE after this series is 2-1. So I feel like, you're going into this season and looking even at BDE's schedule, they're going against Tyranny this week, the top team in the league. And then they go against like Genie Pearl, which I think has been really rising in terms of just like player skill, team coherency. And then, it just seems to me that like both of these teams are going to have somewhat of like a rougher schedule as the season goes on. So I'd like to see where they both kind of end up. But with that, we're going to look at that next game. So it was 2-0 for G&E Pearl versus Glacial Phantom. So G&E started off with a really rough start. They started off 0-2 to the series from this, the first 2 series in the season. And they were having a really rough time, honestly. We had a very like low expectation for G&E going into it. We didn't know any of the players. We knew they were all kind of new to the competitive scene. So we were just kind of, keeping the book open, seeing what they do. And I think this series really showed that G&E, especially with some of the crazy picks we saw on stream last week, there was a lot of potential, I think, and it was just the beginning starting for G&E. So unfortunately for Glacial Phantom, I think this team is still going to be struggling to find their footing. They're 0-3 now, and I think people were mentioning they had subs, they had some role swaps, so I think going on from at least last week and moving into this week, Glacial Phantom is going to be looking to try and really, really prove themselves as they go up against TD Syndicate. So, Clutch, I will let you have the honor of talking about Renekton support that G&E Pearl played in the first game.
Yeah, so this, I guess, was something they were planning for a very long time. I guess the whole point of it is just to play hyper aggro, and then basically you just one-shot someone. And I mean, I guess it worked out for them. G&E looked pretty good. Obviously, they got a new coach last week. Riddy came in, the varsity head coach for our collegiate team. So him coming in for sure going to help out G&E a lot. And you already saw after that first week that they looked like a much, much better team under his control. So for sure going to see how they're going to be doing in these coming weeks. And for the side of Glacial, right, they didn't have their starting roster. They showed some promise. Game 1 was kind of a stump, but game 2, like, they were fighting back, and they actually hit some of these wombo combos that their comp needed them to hit. So they had coordination and fights, but like they were just so far behind, like it just didn't matter. Like even if they hit like the perfect ultimate, they were so out of the game that it's just kind of doomed. So for the side of Glacial, obviously this week I don't think they're going to have the same starting lineup because 2 of their players don't have enough ranked games to participate. So it's going to end up being a sub mid, I believe. But then the rest of the roster should be there. So it's not the end of the world. They're going up against TD Syndicate, which is going to be very, very, very hard for them to win. Now, TD Syndicate didn't play last week, so, who knows? Maybe they can end up taking a game. But yeah, G&E Pearl pulling out the Renekton, something we literally have not seen support ever in EL. The entire league, we've never seen it. So some unique picks coming out, and we'll have to see what they're going to pull out for this week against TDS Chocolate.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously a little unlucky that their top laner was just like perma disconnecting, reconnecting, struggling with the internet issues, right? Being in like a whole different country, I believe you said. But, um, yeah, with that, I think it was a really good showing, like you said, by G&E Pearl. Like, there was just so much pressure across the entire map, especially when you picked Callista or Renekton, right? You're just playing, and it's kind of like, I would say it equates to Samira and Nautilus, but even more aggro, right? Because, you know, at least Nautilus is considered a support. Renekton is, I mean, he's the Croc, right? I don't think he's the Croc. There's not much more to say beyond that. But other than that, it was a really strong showing from everybody else in G&E. And I think the shining hope from Glacial Phantom still remains in their mid laner. Harry McDonald's played I think a really strong game against Gabe Recall, especially in that. I think the first game is really where it showed, and that second game playing that Seraphine. I think by the time, like you were talking about in the second game, they're playing this Wombo comp. Like they have that Malphite, they have that Seraphine MF. Like we're just trying to press R. I think by the time they were able to kind of have all of their ults coordinated, it seemed a little bit too late for them to really have a chance in winning those fights, despite hitting all of their ultimates. So I think the main play or main gameplay changes that have to happen for Glacial Phantom, especially has to be in that early game. We saw even in that first game they were playing Jinx, their ADC, and they were playing Jinx Lulu, and I think they took a really bad trade or got ganked really early in the game, and then they were both down summoners, and they just could not play the game afterwards, right? So maybe it's like we need to be more cognizant of that. Maybe we need to just change our game plan, right? Change what we draft so that we're not so susceptible in the early game. But I think that's something that Glacial Phantom is going to be looking to change, especially going into this week. But Silent, I don't know if there's much else you want to say. Was there like a highlight player from either team that you wanted to point out?
Yeah, I think G&E has a highlight player that everyone should be talking about, and that has to be Ritz, the coach, as opposed to just a coach diff. Looking at these drafts, they're just actually like super smart. Um, I love the Renekton pick. I'm gonna keep talking about the Renekton pick because I think it's amazing. It's literally just a Leona pick that just does more damage. You're just gonna treat it like Leona. You have a dash in and it just a point and click stun. Plus, you have a Callista that can throw you on top of someone to do more point and click damage. Such a super strong and smart pick to go with. Um, I'm gonna assume that's a coach's thought, unless this is a pick that the team has practiced before in the past. But other than that, I think this coaching clearly turned the team around. G&E has good players. Gabe Recall is one of them that I want to focus on a lot because he has super good matchups, stuff like that. Especially against Harry McDonald, who was a strong player that I wanted to look at during that game and did show up at some points in the first game. The second game, it kind of just seems like it fell apart a little bit. But the first game he had a lot of good points throughout the game to like push his team ahead. But it was just too much for them.
Yeah, for Glacial Phantom, I could say like maybe string it up to a little bit of unlucky, like people were saying in the chat. Jinx actually had comment that first game too. Little unlucky, it happens. We click things wrong. I think there was one game last season in the LPL. Player had like a jungler didn't have smite or something, and they weren't allowed
Yep.
to remake. Yeah, if you remember that, and
I
it
did not
happens.
remake those. Like,
Yeah, it happens. Pro players do it. It's okay. But with that, we're going to look at that third series of AH Tyranny versus Snack Bears. So I think Clutch and I we were able to catch, it was like the end of the second game, and I was able to catch most of the third game as well from Downfall's perspective, AH, their top laner. So Clutch, I'll let you start us off with this series.
All right. I'm going to say right now, most underrated top laner in the league, Downfall. We saw him on stream. I believe it was week 1. He ended up not doing so well game 1. And we were like, all right, it was on the Fiora up, I believe.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, maybe this is going to be a weak point for the side of Age Tyranny. Then he turns it on the Gnar. Solo carries the game. I don't remember what game 3 he played, but I remember him popping off. This series, Gwen absolutely smurfs on the Gwen. Every single game he gets it. Game 3 pulls out the Aatrox and like basically carries his team. Like this guy is an exceptional player. I got to catch part of the stream. He has great mental too. And he's a great team player. Like this is literally what you want in a silver player. This is exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who can carry when they need to, people who can play weak side if they have to, good mental, great team player. I mean, it's literally the perfect makeup of a silver player, and I think he has a ton of potential. Easily could hit gold and become a superstar. I already think he's a superstar for this team because, I mean, this team is just stacked, right? Langmo, Downfall, Rocky, Raining Wolves, Bickle, like all of those players are really good. Now, Snack Bears, on the other hand, they were able to take a game. And one player I want to point out, actually two. So their mid laner, SNC Moonbeal, I don't know how to say that, and then SNC Talon. I think those two players are their star players. Talon is like, I think right now he's like gold 4, 73% win rate, by the way. Like, this guy's cracked, and he plays the Nico. He plays the Zoe. He plays like Ari. He plays these like mid laners that nobody's going to expect you to lock in support. And then he ends up 1v9ing. Their mid laner pulled out the Kaisa. I watched game 2. For sure had some mental damage on AH Tyranny. 13, 3, and 13 on the Kaisa. Absolutely disgusting. So this series was a banger. I could see this be like a playoff series, to be honest. And I both these two teams really impressed me, and I'm for sure looking forward to seeing these two teams down the line.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you. Like you were saying, we were pointing out a downfall, especially on that Aatrox. You can just like maybe look at the KDA and you're like, oh no, he had a really low KP, you know, whatever. But if you actually like, you know, look at the gold, SNC Homeless had 8.1k on that Ornn, and Downfall on that Aatrox had 14.5k, was up 2 levels. And I was actually watching his POV in the stream, and dude was just untouchable on that side lane. He was constantly pressuring, and there was so much communication on the side of AH Tyranny between like Downfall saying, I'm pushing for this, I'm going to be looking for this tower, you guys can't take that fight, I don't have TP, or you guys can fight, I have TP, right? And there is a lot of really good comms, I think, from the side of Downfall and the rest of his teammates. Yeah, other than that, it's just disgusting when you have a really strong top laner. I would know. Trust me, I would know. There's a lot that can happen with the power of a 1-4 comp. You see a lot in silver and gold, right? We see this a lot in EDL where they're just, okay, weak side, top laner, tank duty, right? You're playing Ornn, you're playing Malphite, you're playing Shen, or whatever have you. But if you're able to pull off these strong side top laners where even if they don't need jungle help, they can just make these leads for themselves. Like, I've seen Downfall do it over and over again. I think this can be that shining star in your team where it doesn't have to be the only kind of comp or playstyle that you play, but it's quite hard to beat if you're really good at executing it. And I think the side for Snack Bears, like Clutch was also saying, SNC Talon, obviously, you know, you're playing these almost cheese picks, but I wouldn't say cheese all the time, but Ari, Talon, playing even Zoe, right, and Nico, these mid laners that I feel like if you can't play against them in the bot lane, you just need to ban them if you're on blue, because you're obviously not going to see where they're going until the very end. So if you're on red, maybe leave 1 or 2 of them open, see where they're going to go, and then pick your appropriate counter. But at the end of the day, I think that's one of the biggest things, having those strong flex picks. Even if Moonbill might not play them or doesn't want to, like, I don't know, man. I've seen Moonbill pull out a whole bunch of different things in that mid lane. So I think that's something I'd like to see Snack Bears do a bit more, flex between those two players and those champions. And then, like, from there, you just find leads. And then that bleeds into the rest of the map. And then I think SNC Talon, SNC Eska, definitely one of those stronger bot lanes. I'd love to see something spicy. And I don't know, I think it was a really good series. And I'm honestly proud that Snack Bears did pull off a game of AH Tyranny. Everyone was saying, like, no, I just clean AH 2-0, but I think it showed a lot. There's still a lot of potential, especially for Snack Bears, so I'd like to see how they go through the rest of the season. So, Silent, with all of that, you're looking at AH Tyranny, I think, has a really strong top side, and Snack Bears with a very strong bot side. You know, how do you see these two teams going into the playoffs?
I think they're both gonna be super high. Honestly, in my opinion, I think they're both 1 and 2. Respectively. They're both super strong. They play to their strengths, and I think the big difference maker is honestly Moonbeal in the mid lane. I said this last week. I think I said it the week before that. This team just plays around Moonbeal, and it's so insane how well they do most of the time, and with an insane champ pool. I've seen them play things like Zed, Talon, Ari, and now they're playing Kaisa, Ezreal mid, like these crazy picks that no one is going to expect you to actually play, and then do well on 13-3. The Ezreal pick not so great, but I think Snack Bears is super good spot, and I will talk about them much more later on. You'll see. AH Tyranny, I think 4 out of their 5 players are super good. I am not a big fan of Rocky. Everything I've seen from them, it feels like the games they lose, the games they don't do so well in, it's mostly because Rocky's straight running it down. They
Rest
went
in peace,
3
Rocky fans.
with 3-10 on the Zinzao, and I've seen a couple other games in the past just not go so well. Not to say that they can't pull it back. Trust me, they had a 7-0 Hackram game that could be nasty. But they're just gonna have to get more consistent for me to actually support them. I still think H Tyranny's the best team in the league by far. So I'm super excited to see what they can do and how they can improve for playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said, I agree with, and we're gonna look into our predictions for this week. We're starting with Revolution Frontline versus the Snack Bears. So, Silent, again, you're on that team of Snack Bears. It's a 2-1 for, our friends of the Bears of the Snacks. So,
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
yeah, with Snack Bears, right? We're looking like we were just talking about them. You're seeing, like random. No, I wouldn't say random, but unusual picks mid and support. How do you see them adapting towards Revolution Frontline? Very playing like a lot of more traditional comps. They have a very traditional like style. They like that Kaisa, especially on the Spanx. So, how are you going to see them playing this series?
I'll be honest. It's a Silver League.
Word.
I think because it's a Silver League, these untraditional picks are going to work, and I think they're going to consistently work because people just can't adapt to them. People play the reason good styles are good and higher level is because usually they have little to no counterplay. You have strong picks that just you pick them in good spots to excel and win. But these other picks, like picks that no one's going to practice against, tell me who's going to practice against an RE support? No one's going to practice against that. Who plays against Ezreal mid consistently besides people who played 5 seasons ago? Nobody. So these picks are going to help this team excel and get into the upper echelon, which I think they already are going to be sitting. And mechanically, they're really good, all of them. They got the correct mechanics to actually excel them in the Silver League. So I think if they just consistently maybe get onto some meta picks or just strong, that's why they're meta. So maybe if they look to get those meta picks in, but honestly, if they're working, these picks are working for them, they should just keep drilling it, and I think they're gonna keep winning games off them.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, there's a lot of these untraditional picks, and that we even saw, right? If G&E Pearl can pull off Renekton support, and we've seen Snack Bears consistently pull off a whole bunch of like sometimes even wilder picks, like you were saying, that Kaisa Ezreal mid lane. I think there's just a lot of potential for Snack Bears. I think maybe a little bit of this, we brush up a bit on our drafting skills. We make our picks just like super ambiguous. Then I can see them taking Revolution kind of off. I don't know, taken by surprise, really. So Clutch, you and I both said Revolution at 2-1. I'll let you start, my friend.
Yeah, so I think Revolution is, to me, like, so obviously Snack Bears have a bunch of these weird picks coming in that they can play, right? We talked about it. There's so many things that you can play for, and you can't really just prep for everything. The problem is when you play a lot of these really, really weird picks for the side of Snack Bears, you also have to be able to execute these. Like, really, like, the ease of execution is so much more harder when you're playing things like Zoe support, Ari support. You're not playing things that legitimately are supports. They're not meant for that role. So you already have the ease of execution, you're already kind of making it harder for yourselves. Then you're putting ADCs mid, which again is making it a little bit harder. Like, you're making the ease of execution harder. And usually in a Silver League, most of the time, the team that just picks the easier comp is going to win because it's going to be so hard to to be able to execute these picks that they play. And for the side of Revolution, why I have them 2-1 is I think they're just going to draft standard. They're just going to play standard, and Snack Bears are going to make mistakes. And Rev is a very, very good team where they can capitalize on these mistakes. They're not one of those teams where Snack Bears can kind of just run over them and play whatever they want. You can't really do that against Revolution. Now, I think Snack Bears can take a game just because of like, you can't prep against what the Snack Bears are going to play. They'll just play whatever they feel like, and that's what they're picking. So I think they'll take a game. I think Rev, though, they're going to have the easier to execute comps. And at the end of the day, I just am going to take the easier to execute comps over these like weird pocket picks.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I kind of, obviously I have that same prediction as you. The way that we've just seen Rev play, and obviously knowing a few of the players, it just seems to me that they have a lot more of a consistent play style. And by the end of the day, if Snack Bears, I feel like if Snack Bears doesn't have a lot of practice with themselves, right? It's one thing for opponents to prep against them, but I think it's another thing having, all of your players play some like ADC's mid lane or playing some mid laners support, right? I think that's something that also takes a lot of practice from the team that is executing it. So I think my area of concern for the Snack Bears really comes down to how often have you guys practiced these kind of comps, right? I'm not saying they haven't practiced them. I'm not saying they like practice them all the time, but it becomes, right, like if people just don't know exactly what to do, right? You're making split-second decisions every single time you're playing League of Legends. That's just how the game goes. So I think the way that Snack Bears, they could almost shoot themselves in the foot. Just having so many untraditional picks, I feel like makes some of their win conditions a little bit different, right? Compared to Revolution having those standard picks and just a really classic front to back team style that, they've shown that they can play over and over again. So, sometimes I really do agree with you, Clutch. Maybe they drop a game because there's just some pick that they get taken aback and it just runs over the game, right? But I think overall, at the end of the day, Revolution has shown that consistent playstyle that I think will pull them ahead for this series. But with that, we're gonna go to that next series. We're looking at G&E Pearl versus the Donut Shop Chocolate. So, I don't know who to even start with, Matt. We all have the same prediction. I'll just start at the top. Clutch, you said 2-0 for G&E against the Donut Shop Chocolate. Is this like your fanboy behavior, or or is this a genuine 2-0?
Okay, so Donut Shop didn't play last week, right? It was a forfeit, and to me, Donut Shop. I mean, I think Donut Shop's at the bottom of the league right now. I don't think they're 8th. I think they're 7th. But since they did FF, obviously you don't get a point, so they're technically in last. But to me, it's looking a little grim. Now they do have like they're making some changes to their roster. Obviously, they lost their jungler, and they're swapping some people around. So like maybe this is what the Donut Shop needs to turn around their season. But you're staring down 0-3, right? And if you want to be like 4th, you need to go basically like 4-3, which means they would have to win out and not drop any games. And this team still plays Tyranny. They still play BDE Lucid. And I mean, they have Genie and then Glacial Phantom. So they still have two really difficult teams that they have to play. Reason why I said 2-0 Genie this week is after watching last week, I just think Genie is a solid, like, that solid 6th place team. They're going to get that last spot. And obviously TDS Chocolate didn't play last week. So that's like kind of all right, I'm just going to give it to G&E Pearl. Now, my matchup to watch for this week, because obviously I have to have a matchup to watch. I think it's going to be both the ADCs, or you could just say the bot lane in general. I think both these teams have pretty solid bot lanes. Amadeus Penguin and HViz taking on Nub the Scrub and Mystic Azzy. I think both of them, both these bot lanes are super solid. And I can't wait to see what they're going to be pulling out. I mean, we saw last week the Callista Renekton from the side of G&E Pearl. Maybe the Donut Shop's got something planned in case the Callista Renekton comes out. So it could get pretty spicy, but I just think 2-0 G&E, they've won my trust for this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just not even just going off the showing from last week. I think that, we were really underrating G&E Pearl, especially those first 2 weeks, right? And then, like you were saying, Donut Shop Chocolate really has, I wouldn't say like a rough patch, but maybe you could describe them as growing pains, right? Changing that roster up a little bit. Your first few weeks aren't going super hot. Something needs to change. And I don't know if they find what needs to change or find what works even this week. So I just think that the way that Genie has played and that they've showed us that we're not actually as bad as everyone thinks, right? So I think there's just a lot of potential even then. Genie, I really don't think they've showed us everything. I don't think they're like very hardly tested in that last series just because of accidents on the runes or players with like really high ping and stuff like that. So I'd really like to see Genie be really really pushed in a series. So I don't think this is that series. Um, but with that, Silent, you also said 2-0 for G&E.
Yeah, I agree. It's not going to be that serious that they get pushed at all. If anything, I think this is going to be the series where they could try things. They could try those interesting picks like the Renekton support. I don't think they pull out anything that they want to show for like one of their higher teams that they're going to face. I think that this is the treat is like almost like a scrim. I feel like the TDS they have got a lot to work on. I think, and I hope that the FF last week was a mental reset for them. They didn't play. They got to kind of calm themselves. Say, okay, no stress this week. We lost technically, but we got to not play, not stress about anything. Let's reset for next week after that. Um, and then hopefully they can come back a little stronger. I know they're trying to make some changes, and hopefully these work out for them. But I'm hoping. I don't think that these changes are going to happen that quickly. I think Genie is going to have an easy week this week and be pretty fine heading into the later weeks of the season.
The real question is, do you think Donut Shop bans Renekton?
Uh, I feel like it's trolling to ban Renekton, especially after they've only seen it once. And it was impactful, but there is ways to play against it. I do think it's a little rough to ban it, but I would not be surprised if they did.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, if they pull it out in the first game and it becomes a problem, then okay, maybe you ban it the next game, right? It's best of 3, right? Not a best of 1, so you can imagine that maybe they won't pull out something spicy like that. But I think another matchup for me to watch is especially that mid jungle duo for both teams, Gabe Recall and Goat 52 for GNE. I think went a little like no, I wouldn't say unnoticed, but they really had a really strong showing, especially in that series last week in the stream match. I just think there was so much coherency in the side of GNE. It was really hard for me to. I can't even really pick apart the team because I think they just played really well together. And even looking at Cook, he played that. I think he played Shen one game. I mean, when you're playing Shen, you're like, yeah, I'm playing for my team, really. So I really like the pieces that are coming together for GNE versus. So looking at the Donut Shop talk and we saw them on stream, I talked about this on Aftershock, Texas overnight or like late night talk show. Like Clutch was there, Leper was there, Tex was there. We were having a good time, and Leper was talking about. So we were talking about his Trundle. He was playing Trundle with Hullbreaker, and his team was doing Drake. And Leper on this Trundle did not have TP, but his team still took the fight. And I remember asking him about it and saying like, "Yo, man, like you gotta tell your team that, hey, I don't have TP. We can't take this fight." And I feel like there's that lack of lack of communication, lack of I feel like having a game plan, right? Knowing exactly how do we take these fights, where do we want to take these fights, and what's our win con, really? I think Donut Shop is having a lot of troubles just communicating that kind of stuff in the beginning, and I think that will change hopefully this week. That's what I'd like to see, I think, coming from the Donut Shop. I think I was talking to Leper about it after the show too. So Leaksy was just like, honestly, I had no idea what was going on. Team didn't even like say anything. They just like took the fight. So I was like, oh, right. So I think that's kind of one of the things that Donut Shop really needs to start kind of getting back. I would say get back in shape if they really want to turn around their season. But other than that, I think there's still a lot of just raw talent on Donut Shop. So I think that's my take on it, especially. So I would be surprised if they take a game off of G&E, but this is just not the week, I think. But with that, we're also going to move on to that next series, which is another little one-sided one. We're all on TD Syndicate's side as they face Glacial Phantom this week. So we'll go back around the circle. Clutch. I don't even know what to really say, right? Glacial Phantom is a team that is obviously struggling within this season, and TD Syndicate has had a few off games, but I think has shown a lot more consistency in the season.
Yeah. So, I mean, Glacial Phantom coming in, it's gonna be tough because they're not gonna have their mid laner because he doesn't have enough games, which means they're gonna have to have a sub play mid, and their mid, in my opinion, is their best player. Like I think their mid is actually pretty solid. Um, so now without their mid, it's like really hard for me to see how Glacial Phantom kind of wins. And I mean, you just look at TD Syndicate's roster. TD Syndicate, like top 4 team in the league. They've looked very, very solid every single week. They have some exceptional players on their team. Um, I don't know. I just think pound for pound, TD Syndicate is kind of just on paper better. Now, maybe Glacial Phantom, they've got something planned where they pull out some like super, super cheese pocket pick. It ends up winning them a game, but I just don't. I honestly can't really see how Glacial wins without their superstar 1v9 mid, Harry McDonald's.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like there's so many pieces of Glacial Phantom that need to be coming together that just aren't, right? There isn't that kind of overall team cohesion that we're not really seeing over on this. Like, and then we compare it to the side of TD Syndicate, right? I think there's a lot of new talent on TD Syndicate that we were talking about. I think there's a lot of really great points on on the side of TD Syndicate. We've seen, Agency 6 have his pop-off moments, especially in team fights, right? Like mechanically, dude is just it's just nuts, right? And even Rhymes we've seen over a couple seasons in EDL. I think he played jungle in the first season. That's real throwbacks, man. um, we talked about like Super Square, RNG Cherry, and we haven't talked much about their mid laner Sparrowhawk. But overall, I think TD Syndicate, each player has already showed, that kind of mechanical prowess, that ability to just pop off, right? I think Glacial Phantom is just overall, I wouldn't say they're outskilled, but I do feel like TD Syndicate has so many other players they can play around and so much, like, more avenues to win. So I can't really say much against TD Syndicate, especially going into this series. So that's my money. That's the 2-0 for me. So Silence, you also said 2-0 for TD Syndicate. What do you think is the biggest difference between these two teams?
Yeah, I think TD Syndicate is one of the stronger teams in the league. A big difference for them would have to be, I'd say, probably that bot side of the map. Like you said, Agency 6 and Rhymes are just super strong together. I think they're two of the best in their position for this league. And we talked about, you said that TD Syndicate has had some off games throughout the season, so it's a little rough. They could drop a game here, but my thing is they've dropped 2 games this season because they've only played 2 weeks because of the FF last week. They dropped 2 games. Both their weeks they've won. Both their weeks they went 2-1, 1 win, 1 loss, and then the FF, which makes them 2-1. But they've lost a game. They've lost their games to AH Tyranny, the best team in the league, and then they lost a game to BDE Lucid, another top team. They dropped 1 game to them and still took them out 2-1. So I think TD Syndicate is still in this high upper echelon teams, up there with BDE, Age Tyranny, and probably Snack Bears, in my opinion. Those are the top 4. I think they take these games. I think this team, Glacial Phantom, has some upside, but yes, they're missing some of their best players. So I don't think this series is going to be that close. Honestly, I think should be pretty handedly 2-0, especially if TD Syndicate did take that week off last week. Seriously, with some good practice still, hopefully got a scrim or 2 in that week off, and was able to get some not get some cold hands. Hopefully they kept their hands warm, and will come into this week ready.
Yeah, and like you said, they already got that series against AH Tyranny over with, and they still had a really strong showing against them. They won 1 game against them. I think overall, like we were talking about, a lot of good team fighting mechanics from the side of TD Syndicate. So I can only imagine how much better they've gotten. And yeah, I mean, just looking at it, they really gave AH Tyranny a run for their money. So going against Glacial Phantom, a team that is just objectively weaker on paper than AH Tyranny, it's hard for me and obviously anyone to say that TD Syndicate just isn't the stronger team coming into the series. But yeah, I mean, Glacial Phantom, like we were talking about, there is still a lot of potential for this team to really upset and really show up and change, I think, the favors going into the series, obviously being 0-3. Something's got to happen, right? I mean, if you lose this week, then you're 0-4. And then and then you end off the season, you're just losing and losing. And then, playoff dreams, unlucky, right? And I think if they were able to take this series off TD Syndicate, you would have that head-to-head. You would have, it could be like a massive tiebreaker. We talk about this all the time. Clutch, how many people in that tiebreaker? It was like a 4-way tie.
Last year for what, EGL?
Yeah, for EGL.
Yeah, I think it was either 4 or 3, and I remember I had oh my god, it took like 30 minutes to figure out who goes where. That was not fun.
Yeah, right? We're at that point where every series counts. So, if Glacial Phantom is able to win this one, it really, really helps and changes their season. But, Clutch, looking at these two teams, any, last comments, any final players, or, anything that you want to point out before we go?
No. I don't have anything.
No, dude's got nothing left to say.
Get to the stream match!
Oh my god, stream match. Woo. Okay, so this is the stream match of the week. We're looking at BDE Lucid versus AH Tyranny. If you guys noticed, it's a little one-sided this week, except for, literally the first series where Silent... Woo! Yeah, where Silent picked something else that wasn't what Cole and I picked. But BDE Lucid versus AH Tyranny, it's obviously a very close match, I would say, just looking at it. BDE Lucid, just having a really, strong showing, I think, up until now. And then AH Tyranny, also just having a stronger look, because, you're that undefeated team right now. You're 3-0, and like we were talking about before from what happened last week, we were pointing out Downfall, right? And really strong in that side lane. Can be unstoppable. He, if left unattended, dude's just gonna double your top laner's gold. So I think that's my main point of interest between these two teams. But Clutch, you and Silent, and me, we all said 2-1. So what makes this a 2-1 instead of a 2-0?
Well, this is what makes it a 2-1. Okay, so BDE, every single series has actually gone 3 games the entire season. So that means this one's going 3 games. Guys, it's not that the fact that they're close in any skill, it's just that, no, I'm kidding. But that is true. BDE has gone to 3 games in every single series. I just think these teams are very close in skill. I think AH Tyranny, again, is the best team in the league. But that doesn't mean there's these TD Syndicate, Rev, BDE, Lucid, Snack Bears. I feel like they can all at least take a game off of them, if not beat them. It's not like they're unbeatable. Obviously, AH Tyranny's favored, right? You'd say, obviously, AH Tyranny is going to be favored in this matchup. They're 3-0. Everyone else is 2-1. AH Tyranny have looked like the best team. But BDE Lucid have looked good, too. That's not to take away from BDE Lucid, who have had some pretty solid games. Ended up taking a game off of TD Syndicate, which TD Syndicate's a very good team. They beat Rev, which Rev is another good team. This is another test for BDE Lucid. We'll see how they're going to do this week. What do I want to look for? Hold on. Let's see what the matchup to watch for this week is. Let me look at these rosters. I'm not gonna. Okay. You know what? I know what the matchups to watch. We're gonna talk about people we don't talk about, right? We've talked about Downfall. We've talked about Langmo. We've talked about Raining Wolves. Okay. The 2 people we have not talked about on AH Tyranny, Rocky and Bickle. Now for BDE Lucid, I think we've talked about a lot of them, but I know I've not talked about the supports. So I'm going to point out the supports. Bickle and BDE Tempo. I think this is going to be a huge match for both these supports because I'm not going to lie. A lot of these supports in this league, maybe it's just because I'm a support main. They don't really wow me. I don't get the wow factor.
Yeah, okay, D1.
Crap.
All right, relax.
All right. All right. I don't get a dang. This support is absolutely cracked. So I want to see Bickle and I want to see BDE Tempo absolutely pop off. All right. I'll give them the seal of approval from the owner. All right. You get the owner bias for the rest of the season. So I want to see one of these 2 just absolutely pop off. I don't care what you pick. You can pick anything. Your coach might not like that, but you can pick anything. So I'm going to be looking forward to that. I think both these teams very, very close in this matchup. And yeah, easily going 3 games without a doubt. And is the stream match, which should be a banger to watch on stream.
Yeah, I mean, Clutch, remember in the preseason tournament? I don't know, it's looking a little familiar. The logo is.
Yeah, it might be both the teams that played.
Uh-oh. Is it the script, man? This is the rematch, right? It's
Of course.
like you're saying, like this is a close series, not only just because of like player skill, but just from what they've shown us already. I think put downfall on something like a strong side top laner that he's just gonna like relax in the side lane by himself. No one's gonna be able to touch him. I think like we were saying for BDE, really focus on lethal and tempo, right? We're looking at what they can do versus Tyranny's bot lane. I think the Yes Parade, big Ashe player. I think Ashe is a champion that's really starting to rise in that meta. So if you put Yes Parade on that Ashe, let them, if they're gonna lose in that side lane, in the bot lane, let them lose gracefully. It's okay. You're Ashe. You're useful. Just press R. So I think there's a lot of potential, just even how Tyranny and BDE decide to play their side lanes. It kind of becomes a battle of, okay, is their bot lane gonna pop off, or is their bot lane gonna just like lose, but like not too hard. It's okay. And Downfall is gonna have a massive gold lead on BDE's top laner, like Pac, right? So it really depends on how they want to play and what really comes down, I think, in that series. And I think that's what I'm gonna be watching for, especially. So Silent, you also said a 2-1 in this. What makes you think it really turns towards Tyranny's favor compared to BDE's?
Yeah, I think Tyranny is just a more cohesive team overall compared to BDE. BDE's has good synergy, but I think Tyranny is just showing that they're able to endure some of the pain, especially if some of their players aren't playing as well. They're able to pick up the slack and actually carry these games. Downfall carries. We've seen Downfall carry before, especially when a team is a little bit behind. He's able to pick them up and just easily carry them across the finish line. My biggest thing is I think this match is easily a game that we could see late playoffs, even finals. This is going to be a super fun one to watch. I'm glad this is the stream match because this is something that a lot of people are going to be looking forward to. Is, hey, which one of these teams is going to be in that top 2, 3 seeds at the end of the season? So I'm excited to see this. I honestly, this series can go either way. If you told me that BDE won, wouldn't be surprised. You also told me if you Tyranny won 2-0, I wouldn't be surprised. Either way, I think it can go to either of them. But I think this day, Tyranny wins.
Yeah, and I need to correct myself. It's Raining Wolves that's playing. Not Yes Parade. My bad. My bad, bro. Um, Even then, like Raining Wolves, I think has had a really strong showing, especially in that bot lane. I'd like to see, like, we don't really know a lot of what Raining Wolves has played. He's shown that Jin, I think, a couple times. But other than that, yeah, I really want to see just how these bot lanes play, regardless of who is in the bot lane. Um, yeah, Silent, just building off everything what you said too. I think this series really can swing either way, 2-1 for BDE or 2-1 for Tyranny. I'd like to see how these drafts develop, right? If Downfall is playing all these champions and that, are just really running over Pac in that side lane, it really becomes like, what do we need a ban, right? Is he going to blind something like Jax or something like Aatrox or Gwen, right? Gwen still that possible flex. So it really becomes what do we ban? What do we take away? How do we want to play? So I'd really like to see how BDE really adapts to Tyranny and vice versa, right? How Tyranny adapts to BDE as that series goes on after that first game. Clutch, between these two teams, my question for you is, when you're looking at both of these teams in that top side and in that bot side, right? What do you think really becomes the biggest tipping point? As in, like, if bot lane really wins, do they just win the game? Or if top lane wins on either team, right? Do they just win the game?
Yeah, so honestly, like, I feel like if, one bot lane steamrolls or like one top lane steamrolls, I feel like the game is not over. It's not saying that these players can't carry, but like, I feel like these teams are so good that if someone gets ahead, they're not gonna like Giga run it down, like give them even more kills. They're gonna slow down the game. And I mean, we're gonna see these two on stream, so we'll see how that's gonna go. But like, I feel like just because one lane wins doesn't necessarily mean the game's over in this, at least this series. I think against like some of the lower teams, if like one lane won, I feel like yeah, it could just be over. But these two teams are just too good that one lane winning is not going to be the end of the world. Now, if there's like two lanes winning, then that's a whole different story. But like just one, I think both these teams can handle that in this series.
Yeah, I'd really liked. I think we didn't really point this out either, but between those two mid laners, Lengmo and Fritz, we're seeing a lot of like, so with Lengmo, seeing of how he's played before, has played that like Victor, some Oriana, and a lot of these like blindable champions that will scale, they'll do well and play for those team fights. On the other hand, you have Fritz who really likes those assassins, likes that Katarina and that Akali, right? So I think this is also another volatile matchup between, if Fritz is able to actually get ahead, then I can also see BDE actually taking that series and that win. So I think that's another thing for me to watch, especially if how do they play around these side lanes too? Are your mid laners going to rotate? Are they gonna camp their top laners or their bot laners? Or are they just gonna like outclass the other, right? I think it's gonna be something interesting that's going to be another point, but where the teams really could make that big difference in the series. But I guess my final question for you, Silent, between these two teams, I'd like to ask you about the junglers. So we see BDE Creed and BDE Creed versus Rocky. So I know you were saying that Rocky can actually kind of run it down sometimes. I think we saw him play Poppy and have no mythic until like his third item. So between these two junglers, right? Would you say that Rocky could be the weakest link for Tyranny, or would you say that BDE Lucid for their jungler Creed, could that be the kind of foundation and rock that they need?
Yeah, I definitely think Rocky's the weakest link. I'm not like, that's not mean he's also bad. I'll be honest. Like, I'm not saying he's like a bad player, but I think he's definitely the weakest link. I mean, every team's got one. He's definitely the weaker part of that team, and I think if BDE wants to succeed, they'll try and look to have Creed kind of push Rocky to his limits. Maybe get him to have that 3-10 Zhao game, or maybe he might just have an 8-0 Hecarim game like he had last week. It's really coin flip, honestly, it feels like. But I think the way BDE is going to win is trying to facilitate have jungle facilitate as much as the map as possible and put Rocky as far behind it as he possibly can.
Yeah, I think it just that mid and that jungle, how they choose to play around who and how it happens, it will really decide how each team decides to play and how that series plays out for sure. But with that, we're at I think we're around our time here. So this is our streamed series of tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, I think, unless Clutch told me again that the match got delayed.
It's 8.
Okay, we actually have a match at 8, folks. So 8 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be watching BDE Lucid versus Tyranny. Again, everyone who is playing, good luck in your matches. Thank you guys for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you guys tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, for BDE Lucid versus Tyranny.